Thank you for having me. I'm Bonno Pel. My colleague Tom Bauler is with me today and was with me while we were working on this paper. We are from your dear neighbors from the other side of the road, ULB. Center for Sustainable Development Studies. And that's also a bit of our background, yet we are currently working on social innovation. And on social innovation discourse, and at some points, as I discussed with you and colleagues, Francis, I had the idea that this global brain, that it's added another analytical dimension to what we were doing already. I will try to lay that connection a bit today. Social innovation discourse and the politics of the global brain. I start with the first and then move towards the latter. And the more we come close to that, the more you are invited to interrupt me, ask me, and discuss. I'll try to keep it within an hour. What I will do is some basic introduction on transit, our project. I will tell a little bit about the tension out of which this, the intellectual tension out of which this talk came forward. I will give some empirics as well to illustrate a little what I'm talking about, and then slowly move towards teasing out where the politics of the global brain come in. And I'll give a list of references. We also have a paper on which this presentation is based, which also contains a lot more references that I've been free to use throughout this presentation. Transit. By the way, I brought some materials for you that you could browse a little. It's an international collaboration. Several European research institutes, but also a few in Latin America. It's about transformative social innovation, acronym TSI. And transformative social innovation is a special form of social innovation. It's the social innovation that is kind of more challenging towards current institutional structures as we have them, and also a bit more critical in approach, and it aims also a bit higher. It really tries to change and achieve something to resolve the major problems that we have today of social inequality, sustainable development, for example. To read it out for you, it's a change in social relations. It involves new ways of doing, organizing, framing and knowing, or combinations of that. Challenging, alter or even replacing dominant institutions and structures in a specific social context. One important thing about our project is that it's very much engaged research, so we don't only study dynamics of transformations in social innovation processes and try to be cutting edge in academic terms, but also formulate some practical advice. We are very strongly committed to developing knowledge that is relevant for practitioners in social innovation, but also with. That is important. That's a background of strong societal engagement. As Tom and I, already from the beginning onwards, we had some talks about, yes, it's nice that we try to empower these people in the field, but to empower towards what precisely, on what normative grounds, who are these actors then, who are we to empower and who not. And also by proclaiming all kinds of things about transformative social innovation, what does that mean to that social innovation process if we as researchers start to claim all kinds of things about who is innovative, who is the front runner, who is the resistor, and who merits support. all of that is certainly not obvious politically. And in the process of that, we have also started to consider this design knowledge and the discourse about it by practitioners and by scientists. How will that perform in a context in which communication channels are evolving? So there the global brain comes in. These questions that we ask, there is quite an extensive background to this. Most people in the project, they have a background in transition studies, transitions in socio-technical systems like mobility, energy, agriculture, experiencing some quite serious systemic contradictions and persistent sustainability challenges that somehow are not really solved, despite all kinds of efforts to resolve them. It's a very holistic systems thinking approach to current sustainability challenges. And it operates through a multi-level perspective on transitions that you might know or might not. Anyway, I'll try to summarize it a little, and of course we can come back to this. What you see is in the middle socio-technical regimes, which could be the regime that kind of circumscribes what happens in the mobility system, for example. These are constellations of governments, industry, it's also cultures, it's general ideas and expectations of mobility that all together form a rule system that governs how the mobility system or an energy system develops. The idea is below you have evolutionary niches, all kinds of novelties. It can be technological novelties, but it can also be social novelties, as they both play a part in socio-technical transformations. They try to influence these dynamically stable regimes. Generally, they will not succeed in this, or the novelty will be absorbed by such a regime and it will be turned into something more incremental and less radical as an innovation. Yet, at some points, it is possible windows of opportunity arise in which these novelties actually get some change effectuated in these regimes, because there are some exogenous general major shifts in the landscape, for example, ICT revolution, that would be one landscape change, through which suddenly possibilities arise that allow these upcoming niches to change the dominant ways of doing. This is an emerging research field. There's a lot of publication about this in research policy, technological forecasting and social change. The basic idea is that here below, these upgoing arrows of evolutionary niches, you can cultivate them, you can help them to find their way into these regimes, and also what is possible to try to change the selection environment for these evolutionary niches. So it's working on two ways. Together there is talk of this is transition management, but then again management is a bit of a strange term because they're processes in complex systems. They cannot be managed from a point. So it is more about cultivating the niches, modulating ongoing change on the regime level, keeping an open eye to how one can seize landscape changes. So modulation is a nicer term, a more apt term for the management of these transitions than transition management. We're talking about socio-technical transformations. a lot of attention goes out to the technological niches that one can cultivate and somehow try to modulate. But of course there's also social innovations that similarly one could try to cultivate and empower. And as we are studying social innovation, it's the social niches that we are most interested in. So back to the scheme. There are a lot of critiques have been voiced already about this model, which is quite nice to describe the overall dynamics through which, for example, a mobility system or an energy system might undergo a transition. Still, that doesn't tell very much about how a certain actor in a certain situation with certain capacities and resources, what that actor could do within the bigger picture. It's a bird's eye view, and from the frog perspective, it's not really informative. Therefore, if one tries to translate this into direct guidance for situated action, one encounters all kinds of problems. So in transitions research there have already been some quite convincing critiques on the implicit managerialism that speaks from the transition management that takes this overall perspective as its guidance and tries to translate it directly into action. There's also some discussion about the whole idea that, yes, these transitions, we should accelerate them so that we go from the unsustainable A to the sustainable B. All kinds of linear projections, they come back even though it is a model of a complex system. The levels and the units in this picture. There's also quite some discussion about that. It sounds a bit simplistic about this three-level portrayal of events, isn't it? Much more about networks and much less about levels. All in all, to cut it short, there's quite some discussion about how these upcoming niches, how they could be empowered. And even where to find precisely where the change is coming from. Because as you're talking about, as we're dealing with actors who are aligned with others, it's not so easy to say, here is the innovation and that is the status quo. It happens in between. I'll just go over it. Nothing happens. I'll wait for enlightenment.
Make the other one bigger. Give more light here.
Yeah, up to you. It's however you like it. So these social niches, and more generally the evolutionary niches, it's not so. It's far from trivial how you can empower them and how you can identify them, and that's a bit the backgrounds to which we have started these questions about social innovation in particular. Then I haven't shown anything about what social innovation actually is. To give a general impression, there's all kinds of manifestations of it that you might be acquainted with. The eco-villages have been around for quite some time. They've united into an international network. Time banks are coming up, might be familiar to you under another name in the Flemish context. Bolsa Familia is a very famous one, by the way. It is launched by Brazilian governments, indicating that social innovation is not necessarily something that depends on citizens' initiative, as it is sometimes thought. The seed swapping movement, also quite prominent in the Belgian context. And Uber as well. Then again, one might think, yeah, is this social innovation? Isn't this commercial innovation? Depending on your definition, it's in or it's out. Of course, especially in the Brussels context, we all know that this is also a quite politicized and tense social innovation process that is accelerating now, and we don't know how this is going to end. Having sketched a little bit about what could be examples of social innovation, I'll try to sketch the discourse about it a little, which is decidedly complex. First of all, an interesting thing about the social innovation discourse, maybe legible, maybe not, both by policymakers, but also by NGOs, by civil society organizations, there is some widespread endorsement for the idea that social innovation, that this is one of the answers, or maybe even the answer to meeting current persistent problems in society, like inequality, sustainable development, social inclusion. There's different accounts of that, and it's important also to indicate that transit is also one of these parties. That's how we started out with our project. We do believe that social innovation holds this potential. On the other hand, there already have been some very fierce critiques of the social innovation discourse and the expectations that it's evoking in society. Our countryman Singedouw has quite sharply pointed out that by raising all kinds of ideas about citizens apparently being able to change the world, that in a way that this kind of reproduces the neoliberal ideology that yes, agents can achieve a lot. It is about individuals, and let's not spend too much attention to government, because people can do it for themselves. In a way, what he also pointed out, in a way it also depoliticizes the current situation a little, in the sense that it focuses on the creativity of individuals, and somehow draws attention away a little bit from the dominance of market mechanisms, for example, and also tends to downplay that governments might have a strong role in addressing current societal problems. And both social innovation discourse and neoliberal ideology meet there at that point a little, in the sense that they hollow out the legitimacy of the state. Another one is social innovation. Yeah, there's all kinds of social entrepreneurs coming up, all kinds of new sharing schemes, which raise some idea as if we are reaching a society in which everything is shared and everything is nice and together we can solve it. Whilst a lot of these sharing schemes are actually very much maintaining the capitalist ways of sharing and not so much the social ones. For example, Uber, you can consider it social innovation. On the other hand, it is always also being critiqued as actually a kind of hyper-capitalism, which is being introduced in the name of some kind of social sharing. Same way, ideological smokescreen, distracting attention from class struggle has been pointed out. And also, because it is about innovation, it tends to distract a little bit from the fact that change tends to involve very different ideas about the direction in which it should go, and it tends to distract a little bit from structural inequalities in society. So those two together sketch a little bit how politicized this emerging discourse is. Then, not very surprisingly, a lot of researchers, I name only two, but there's plenty of articles about this, pointing out that social innovation discourse, it means about anything, and depending on the definition, it includes this and that, and it changes all the time. So in the end, maybe it's just a policy buzzword that everybody seems to like, and nobody seems to know what it really means. And also, it's scientifically just not. It doesn't really make sense to work with it because it's conceptually so unstable that it leaves you in running in circles scientifically without getting anywhere. So this is one point in the discussions that Tom and I have been having over the last year. So yes, maybe our 4-year project is about a phenomenon that hardly really exists and is, possibly even a bit of a dead end. Maybe it is an empty phrase, and maybe it is indeed just a passing policy hype, which gives us some money to do research, but in the end will not have any sustained impact or academic contribution. And as I sketched, we are not alone in some slight doubts about that concept of social innovation. On the other hand, I give some examples. You can see that there are some things happening in society that do suggest quite strongly that socially innovative practices, that they do exist, that they are out there. And as others have pointed out and articulated before us, they might be less easy to point out compared to technological innovations. On the other hand, they're also innovative, they're also progressive, like technological innovation, which quite generally receives a lot of applause in society. It has also been brought up by our German colleagues from the group of Jürgen Hobart that as the economy becomes more and more a knowledge economy, one could argue that the importance of social innovation as opposed to technological innovation, that it is increasing. So there's also some quite strong normative reasons and also empirical reasons to also maintain that no, it's not an empty phrase, it's not a passing hype. And the people who do this merit recognition. They merit it that we identify their activity as innovative as other innovative activities are as well, and not neglect them. And these considerations have led groups of other researchers, mainly in Germany and Austria, to really take initiative towards the scientific stabilization of a SI discourse, meaning define more closely what it is and isn't, articulate what its role is in society, try to delineate possible questions that should be answered to develop as a field of practice, but also as a field of research. Explain to policymakers what can be expected from it. And chart the fields, indicate what activities are going on where, and thereby make it more visible and easy to acknowledge. So this is a second point that Tom and I reached, that yes, okay, maybe it is vague and undetermined as a concept, and indeed it merits some skepticism or at least critique. On the other hand, if you dismiss it as a concept, you're also, in a way, withholding recognition from people who are really socially innovative and in that sense merits support in a society that as a whole subscribes to innovation as a progressive ideal, by and large. So there are some normative reasons to stabilize social innovation discourse and also commit oneself to that as a researcher. On the other hand, it's one thing to say that there are reasons to try to stabilize the discourse. On the other hand, and then we are already moving towards the global brain. I hope you feel that it's not so easy to do that, because it seems that society doesn't work like that, or at least societal structures don't make it easy to stabilize a notion like social innovation, which is utilized by so many different actors. Of course, there's a lot of earlier theory about that. One can consider, as we do in our projects, that social innovation is co-produced by several actors. It involves dispersed agency, and it is in between actors. It is a relational phenomenon. It has already been argued much earlier on that social innovation is not so much that is done by either civil society or state or markets, but typically at the interstices of these institutions. It's in between. It's precisely blurring these boundaries between institutions, but also between institutional logics and evaluation systems. And as our German colleagues Raumert and Schubert have written really nicely, it's a multi-referential phenomenon. It is being transmitted through different systems of meaning, like market and state. Again, you can also think of science as a distinct system of meaning, which means that the meaning of the concept, but also what it denotes, that it necessarily evolves over time and therefore cannot be stabilized. So it is inherently unstable, the concepts, and it is constantly selected upon by various actors and institutions. And part of that also means that the precise translations of what social innovation is and isn't, should be and shouldn't be, that tends to be contested all along, and it will stay and it will continue to be contested. One can think again of Uber. What we'll try to do now is illustrate a little what this discourse does in a particular setting. I've chosen the social economy. We did a case study on that. How are we with time, by the way? I'm about halfway.
It's 42.
Yeah.
That's
But we started 15 minutes. We started 15 minutes late.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of on schedule anyway. We can come back to certain parts. A case study, because a case study is quite difficult to get across in limited time. Anyway, I'll try to make it a bit concrete for you, how this SI discourse, how this behaves in practice. It is one out of 20 case studies we did in the consortium on initiatives towards a certain kind of transformative social innovation. The case study in total is about REPES. It's about social solidarity-based economy. It's mainly francophone, global intercontinental network of various local initiatives that somehow try to create economic practices that are more based on solidarity and generation of some kind of social added value as integral part of economic production. In Belgium, there is there's even policy on social economy. That's quite rare on a global scale. You might know even more about it than me, actually, as a relative newcomer. In our case study, we have focused on a platform for social economy that came up around 2000 in Belgium. They tried to join forces between various initiatives that try to do all kinds of small-scale, local projects involving people at a distance from the normal economy circuit, which means people who had for one reason or the other difficulties to find a regular job, found themselves in unemployment, found themselves in marginalized situations, found themselves also socially excluded. They tried to find economic activities for these people to, on the one hand, include them more in society, get them out of the unemployment and the passive situation they were in, and also show that it is possible to produce, but do so in a way that it also benefits society. Like here, the Fietsbund is an example. Recycling centers have also come up like this, with this double objective of some sustainable developments, as they support the bicycle practice, of course, but also including people at a distance from the normal labor markets. They formed a platform, and at a certain point, around 2000, when also Belgian national government, Flemish government were considering that they should innovate in the welfare system because unemployment was becoming structural, two people were marginalized, and these initiatives would be one move towards an active welfare state, as they said. So what happened for these initiatives, that they got some governmental recognition and also that they could benefit from labor subsidies that allowed them to further develop this practice of social economy. What we will do is briefly sketch some different ideas that people can have about social innovation from different perspectives and from different institutional logics. First of all, it's an intriguing response I got from somebody at the ministry involved in social economy policy. After a whole interview about that platform of initiators in the social economy, she asked me, like, by the way, if I may ask, but why do you ask about them? They don't seem to be the social innovators. They're just that platform. They've been resisting us for a long time, and they just stick to their old ideas. They're mainly defending the things that they deem good. If you're researching social innovation, why them? More broadly, in that case study, we found out that in that field of social economy, there's some mostly newcomers who like that label and who like to call them socially innovative, and others think that, well, social innovation, I don't know what that is about, but I just try to do something good, and maybe that's socially innovative. But there is some interesting dynamic in people who like the label and others who seem to deserve the label more but don't use it. What you also see is that to some people the real social economy and the real social innovation, that's about social entrepreneurship. It's about the entrepreneurs who do things and innovate and do this in some kind of socially beneficial way. Whilst to others it's not so much market actors, but it should come up for, it's a civil society matter. It's It should be bottom-up, informal, rooted in the sociaal middenveld, as we call it here, in the grassroots. And then again, there's also others who think, no, social innovation, isn't this what government has been doing all along, and isn't the whole welfare system in a way a social innovation? Why do you always look at these social entrepreneurs? Why do you always look at civil society actors, whilst actually it's mainly governments who are doing the important social innovation here? So there's different attributions of socially innovative agency that you can see in that case. Similarly, I pointed it out already a bit, it became institutionalized, these social economy practices, quite some time ago already. These are people who have started with social workspaces, sheltered workspaces, people with handicaps, but also people with psychosocial problems. This has become quite a regular practice in Belgium. And it has been, the subsidy schemes attached to it have also been around for quite some time. Sometimes it went a bit up. Currently it's being discussed whether that has been maybe that should be cut down a little bit or reorganized a little bit. But anyway, as a policy field, it has existed for quite some time. And the people who do this, they feel that some people consider what they're doing not really social innovation. And they actually think like, yeah, okay, but you're just defending your practice. Now you're fighting for it, that's nice, but also you're just so defensive. So as they point out, and I think this quote says it quite in a nutshell, things can be socially innovative at a point, but at a certain point later down in time, it is no longer socially innovative. More broadly, we see that throughout the case that there is from different actors, but also from more market or more state or more science, more civil society point of view, there are quite some different ideas about how innovative it should stay, and whether it is a good idea to have your separate social workplace or sheltered workspace, which in a way might even stigmatize people, because there's these people who work in that special place. There's something wrong with them. And what they're doing there economically, it's something subsidized, it's nice, but cannot be taken seriously. It's not for nothing that they receive subsidies. So in various ways and through different logics, considerations come up like maybe it should be more an integral part of economic development policy, or a more integral part of an employment policy, and less a separate silo of innovation. Maybe it should just become a regular business, and if it cannot survive like that, then probably it's not good. Or also maybe it should be positioned as something that is normal and not social, and especially not a sheltered workspace, because if it's sheltered, it already suggests that it's not viable in itself, it's inferior. So to conclude, there's just very different ideas about what is socially innovative and what is no longer that, but also how that normatively, what it should be socially innovative and become more normal. Then finally, another nice quote, who said this again? Yes, it was a francophone federation of social economy actors. but also something quite surprising to me, that yes, there's a lot of people in the social enterprise who actually don't know that they are working there. There is no... They just do what they do, but they don't have this sense of being part of a movement. And he was in the business of trying to make more of a movement out of that, make that movement more visible, therefore also gain more recognition from policymakers and from society. Because in the end he had a strong idea that you can all do this locally, but if you don't manage to gain some political voice in the Belgian context, where it is so important to have your voice represented by a certain body, by a body that speaks for all the employees and for the employers. If you don't do that, it will never succeed. And then again, he pointed out that that's not so easy to create that political voice, because in the whole field, all people tend to have quite different ideas about it, what it precisely is, that social economy, and what it should do, and what it should do more, and what less. So it is the mutual detection already that's quite important in that field. It's about being visible, and in the end being recognized by society and by policymakers. Yet, in the same case, we also find out that this whole practice of subsidizing labor that's not ready for the market, that cannot survive on the market without those subsidies, that it's entirely defensible in the Belgian context. For the added social value that is being created, and it's a rich country. However, it is in a way it is a kind of market distortion, because you're subsidizing labor and you're subsidizing the one, not the other. And at certain points, 2005, 2007, if I remember well, this started to become really a problem as the practice of subsidized labor as it existed in Flanders, that it was just out of tune and no longer compliant with EU directives on the matter, which meant that they slowly had to rearrange the whole policy arrangement they had made. One consequence of that was that at that time, if word had gotten out about this de facto illegal practice, and if a lot had been done to highlight all the good things they've been doing, that actually their detection and exposure, that it would have been counterproductive, because it would have put that in the spotlight. So what you can basically say, that this detection is very important for the diffusion of these social innovations, and it can be in both a positive and in a negative way. So, what can we learn from the case? Most basically, it just matters to be identified as social innovation, which underlines also why it matters so much to study how this discourse is evolving. It's not something that happens in language, it has some real consequences for the people involved, how this social innovation discourse and the categorizing that goes along with it, how that operates in society. What you can see is a kind of dynamic that has been theorized earlier by some great minds that sometimes I can follow and sometimes not so much, like Niklas Luhmann and Bruno Latour. This notion is translated, resonated through different logics in society. The way they select upon it, translate it, co-produce it is essentially an evolutionary dynamic, and that is why the stabilization is something that happens all the time in different places. Some stabilizations may also occur between these different systems of meaning, but that tends to be temporary. At least one should expect it to be temporary. Like, for example, the Belgian social economy sector and the policymakers may have had some stabilization over a time. But if some external occurrences happen, like changing EU regulations, then that understanding changes and it becomes very volatile again. Something that's a third step in the thinking discussions Tom have been having and I have been having about this. This means in turn that we should really realize how we as researchers play a role in this evolutionary process in which this SI social innovation discourse evolves. There have been already, we had some ideas about this beforehand, like yes, we should empower these social innovative niches, but then again, why empower them? Why not the policymakers of the social economy departments? They might do some good stuff, and they developed this policy, which was in a way also social innovation. And also in that case, for example, when the policy asked me, why is it precisely them? Why do you ask me so much about that social economy platform? When you ask about social innovation, why them? I could have answered, I think they are the social innovators here. Or I could have said politely, I don't know. Maybe actually you and your people department seem more to be the social innovators. Or, as you pointed out, actually it's more the social entrepreneurs there and there who are the real social innovators. In all cases, I would have given something back if I would write a report about it and do these kinds of claims. It would be quite easy for any of the involved actors to somehow wave with such a report. At various points, it's easy to identify certain actors as being innovative and help them disseminate their narrative about how innovative and progressive they are. We as researchers were out there all the time, even in these interviews. That's the point that we also try to develop a bit more in terms of sociology of knowledge, what is precisely happening there, because science itself is at the moment, all kinds of academics are reconsidering, maybe I should do more action research and develop these kind of talks as I give it now. Maybe I should co-develop this with the people from the social economy sectors rather than talk about them and listen to them a little. Maybe I should devote my time to really support such a social workplace, or rather I should keep critical distance. There's all kinds of different social innovative processes going on in academia as we speak. Meanwhile, what we also have realized, and what also others have pointed out, social innovation other than technological innovation, probably even more than technological innovation, is very much about creating new ideas about agency, what people can aspire to, what people can achieve, what a good citizen does, what a good citizen might achieve, what can be expected from governments, what can be expected from market logic. all kinds of these assessments. They are framings that are being renewed through social innovation. Like social economy is very much about bringing out that economic production can be done with another bottom line than as we know it. So this particular kind of innovation, a very strong part, large part of that is about bringing new ideas into society, new ways of knowing, new ways of framing things. Which means that there are all kinds of feedback loops between what researchers say about social innovation and what socially innovative actors say about social innovation and what counts as legitimate. And yeah, well, that's how we came to the point of the global brain, because having done this case study in the social economy and seeing how there are translations and resonations from all kinds of systems of meaning, shouldn't we also take into account that we can clearly see this also in our case study, that these initiatives, they make use of websites to make themselves known. They form platforms that others can subscribe to, that help people online. They facilitate researchers to come there and write about what they're doing, and they co-develop databases on social innovation with researchers like us. We are also in the business of doing that. So also these new technologies available for communication and the connections between the different institutions that you have, also that evolution adds another layer to the political dynamics that we have seen in our case study on in the social economy. And now I'm going towards the end. As I hope that you will agree, is that this co-production of the transformative social innovation discourse, that this could be used as an exemplar case for more broadly the politics of the global brain, highlighting the different actors involved and the different societal programs that they try to push. What I'll try to do is draw out some implications and some further questions that we could discuss, and then of course we can come back to all kinds of segments in the argument. First of all, what are the key examples of the global brain mediating the discursive dynamics as I have sketched them? And we can consider that for the three aspects that I lifted out in my presentation of the case study earlier. We are talking social innovation, but against a background of understanding that innovation is a socio-technical phenomenon, as explained by Bruno Latour, Michel Calon, these kind of people. And which is also the general understanding in transition studies, that transitions towards sustainability, that they're essentially, irreducibly socio-technical processes. Then again, we focus on social innovation within that context, and nevertheless, you can ask yourself the questions, what are the specifically technical innovations that play a crucial part in the dynamic sketched? And more specifically, what are the innovations in communication that can be singled out as being crucial in these dynamics? That's a more a normative question. How does the social economy example challenge the idea of the global brain as a socio-technical utopia? Francis, I quote you, but of course you know the article better than me, but the global brain, apart from being an empirical phenomenon, it is also to a certain extent a vision on how society could thrive better. it's both a bit. But in that particular article, I quote from you, you have been quite outspoken about this normative approach in which the global brain really counts as a development or a reality that could be, that should be developed further, as it could help address some major societal problems such as sustainable development and social inclusion. Having sketched the social example, to what extent, does that example challenge that, or actually confirm what you have said there? What do you learn about the politics of that global brain from the particular case, of which I have sketched the communication dynamics a little? And then to come back to our initial ambition, in terms that we try to empower these people that we are studying as well. So in the concrete example of the social workplaces or the sheltered workspaces, how could the global brain, this reality and the knowledge about it, how could that be deployed to somehow make people's life better in the social workplace, help develop the social innovation practice of social workspaces, or help disseminate the message of societal transformation that is being conveyed by these social workplaces, namely arguing for an economy that is just more firmly rooted in society and more beneficial to society. And I say concretely, because on a general level we can think of, yes, in the end, the global brain will democratize knowledge and it will empower knowledge, it will empower people, giving them access to that very global brain, and in that way, by itself, allow the excluded to be included more. That's possible, but still, how can we articulate a bit more concretely how the global brain reality could support or facilitate initiative like that? Now, some references. We have a paper which contains more. You might check it later on.
Well, this example of the sheltered workspaces, I actually use it in my paper on the global brain, Return to Eden, where I give it as an example of how life would be under a global brain regime. That the global brain would kind of shelter us from all the sources of stress and give us the work that we like to do and that we're good at doing, but buffering all the stresses that normally go with that, meaning that there would be enough the equivalent of a basic income. You would have all the things you need, basically, and you wouldn't have all the stress of all the administration and all the competition in the marketplace, because that is a coordination function to global brain should perform. Of course, that's an ideal view, it's a utopian view. How to get there is what I'm working on now at the moment, with the idea of an offer network, which is some kind of an intermediate stage between what we have now, the sharing economy, things like Uber, and the global brain vision. So that's something we are now working on, and we are organizing a small workshop about it in December. That's kind of our attempt to bridge the two. But I would have liked to
hear... This is one, by the way. I mean, am I free to move now?
You're always free to move, actually. You were always free to move.
Okay, because then we might have another setup in which I'm no longer in front. So.
As you wish.
Great. Because I didn't know that. And by the way, myself, I'm involved in a case study on the basic income at the moment. So it's kind of a coincidence.
Yeah, so Catholic is quite interested in the basic income, so maybe you should talk about that.
Yeah, but Well, first I want to say thanks for your talk. I enjoyed it. I wrote down a lot of notes. I'm not sure where to start, but yeah, I mean, specifically with my evolving thoughts on where our social economy is now, and you have the idealistic utopian vision of the global brain. The crucial questions to me are what you ended your talk with. What are the concrete steps we can take to go from here to there? And the one thing that I think my focus has been on lately is, I agree with one thing you said in the talk, where in some sense I think the state has been, over the last 30 years, eliminated as a revolutionary, or as a candidate for a revolutionary agent. So, I mean, I sometimes describe this, or you said, for example, social innovation has been challenged as, or critiqued as, reproducing neoliberal ideology of individual innovation over government innovation. And I think in some sense that's true, and in some sense I think that there are a lot of things that could be done with a repurposed state organization that we maybe haven't thought about over the last 30 years. And so a lot of my thinking in the last few months has been really on how the state can act as a catalyst for guided self-organization. Like, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, actually, about all of these sharing economy, social economy-like innovations. And, you know, she eventually said, yeah, the ideal would be that all of these things just self-organize, and it's sort of like magic. You know? Everything just functions, everything just happens. And the way I see the state is as a potential catalyst to get to that state of almost like an emergent everything self-organizes. There's no friction, no conflicts between entities competing over scarce resources or anything. So I think maybe so yeah, I mean, and it's not really a question, but more of how can we rethink the function of the state, and for me, that necessarily involves challenging the idea that the state is a permanent entity that will exist forever. I know that, you know, even though it maybe sounds silly to think that the state will exist forever, but I think people sort of exist within that assumption, maybe even without knowing it. That it's hard to imagine, in other words, a world where, even though the global brain vision or whatever, you assume, okay, well, maybe there's no states in the global brain. But then it's another thing to then really internalize that idea and like actually imagine what a world would be like if there was like no borders. And what possibilities become. To me, the global brain concept is revolutionary insofar as we are able to break out of categories of thought that we don't even know we're in that sense. But yeah, but I also wanted to say you're interested in the basic income idea. I've been thinking over the last while that maybe the basic income idea has popped up, and I still think I support the basic income idea. I think it's an interesting idea. I'd love to see experiments with basic income. But I was thinking, in how far is the basic income idea popping up? Because the state has been eradicated over the last 30 years as an agent for revolutionary activity, and that it's sort of like we can't think of our way out of the global market crisis, so the basic income idea has popped up almost as like a radical excess. Like and in that sense, yeah, I don't know what your ideas are on that.
Does it make it worse?
Sorry?
Does it make it worse, the basic income idea? Just because it's like we have no way to like get out of this situation, so let's take basic income. It sounds from you that it makes it worse.
I think it makes me a little skeptical of the idea in that, well, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily make it worse. All I'm saying is that maybe there are other things we aren't thinking about that could even be better solutions than basic income, but we just aren't thinking about them because the state has been eradicated for so long as an agent for change. And obviously what I'm hinting at...
I think your experience is very much North American. I mean, the state here in Europe has not been eradicated because all the examples you were giving were examples that came from the state. All the sheltered workspace and the social economy, these were all state-created initiatives.
It definitely could be that my experience is... Well, my experience is North American as a fact. I mean, that is my... you know, I don't want to generalize the North American experience to the world as a whole, but it definitely is the case outside of Europe, in the developing world, in specifically, I would say, like in Africa and Latin America, where global market processes are dominant to state innovation. So maybe Europe is an exceptional case. I don't know.
Well, you get Brazil as well.
It's also interesting, dominant to the other to market innovation. You say, right? It already underlines how easy it is to overlook social innovation. Because yes, there's a lot of conspicuous innovation going on, which is more technical and tangible and material, which tends to be market produced. But in the production of social innovation, as far as it merits to be acknowledged as innovation as much as technological innovation, it already becomes less obvious that dominance, because states have been also there socially innovating a lot, and irrespective of whether it's a nice innovation or not. It's another normative dimension. Like Bolsa Familia, for example.
What is the Bolsa Familia?
It is actually basic income related. Basically targeted at helping providing some more basic security to the very poor in Brazil, and of course the social inequality is huge there. And through that allow them to invest more in education and development and health, which has been inspired by basic income. In fact, it is not a basic income, but it has some traits of it. But that's a massive state program, which, according to many definitions, is just a social innovation. And similar things, governmental programs, also in Latin America, but also in the States. But then there are different kinds of social innovation. But what I also get is indeed this catalyzing of self-organization by others. That this could be a general description of the kind of socially innovative activity that states could be doing more in the future. Which is, co-social innovating. Also how it's happened here, by the way. The state played a big part, but it also came a lot from the grassroots. There is some entrepreneurship coming in.
The example I know best is the recycling centers in Belgium, because my mother used to work as a volunteer for one of those recycling centers. Before it was called a recycling center, it was just a shop that was started as a charity where old furniture was being sold at very democratic prices, and they were typically employing people that otherwise wouldn't have found a job. But then later they became part of this network of recycling centers, which was then state subsidized and recognized. So it was originally a bottom-up initiative, but then it became kind of state supported, and now it's quite a good functioning network, which also kind of has a place in the market, because also people use those recycling centers. They buy and sell them. So that's an example of something where you had all things coming together, grassroots, states and markets, and it works.
Yeah,
But it depends also how you see, with respect to what you said, how you see the idealized sort of role of the states in these sort of reconfigurations. And if you look at the comparison of what creates inertia between, in the European case and in the North American case, in the US case to be more specific, the inertia here might be created in some countries or some levels at least from the state inertia. If you look at the United States, there it's the whole court system which creates the inertia and thus prevent people, organizations or whatever to move freely. I have been for a year in the States in 2013 and I never felt more presence than in Europe. And it's not necessarily the state presence which gives you the sort of the boundaries on how you should behave, but it's the fact that you know that somebody will sue you eventually, depending on how
litigious,
you know, here it is. You don't smoke inside of schools because it's not allowed, and somebody will enforce it or whatever. In the States, you don't smoke in the buildings because somebody will sue you because of that. It's a different sort of inertia created or constraints which are created by the two systems. And like the second level of common is maybe if you look at the places, it's anecdotal sort of evidence, but if you look at the places where there's the most pressure, inertia pressure coming from the state actor, it might also be the places where you have quite a lot of social innovations springing up from grassroots. Because it's also against that sort of conflict, you know, too much inertia, too much constraints will create also people moving around in the shadows of the system. Which isn't really an explanatory thing when you think in terms of dynamics, you know, how to help systems to grow and to get sort of be their own pillar. But perhaps you a little bit to see where there might be innovative or social innovation sort of pockets and how they grow against inertia. So the state might have, or the state or the macro or whatever, or the court system might have a role as positively pushing towards social innovation adoption, but it might also be just having a very positive role in trying to stop these things.
In my experience, especially in Belgium, but also in countries like Holland and Scandinavia, is that the state has been playing a very positive role in pushing social innovations and experimenting and subsidizing things.
But I mean, the whole general region we're in, from Holland and Scandinavia and Denmark, I mean, these are the prototypical examples where state innovation has proven itself. And where socialism as a model of societal development has sort of emerged as an alternative to typical American neoliberalism. So I mean, we're in a region that's on the forefront of socialist innovation. I don't deny that. I think if you're looking to states that are doing innovative experimental things, I mean, I always look to what Finland's doing or what Sweden's doing or what Denmark's doing, or they're doing interesting things. But
it's not only them. I think now you look at what there are also governments like the Brazilian one doing things. Not as much as we would like to, but starting.
Well, it already makes a big difference in these examples, like the welfare states. In a way, in our definition, that would be a transformative social innovation that took place. The build-up of the welfare states after the Second World War, keep social peace, make sure that the communists don't come in, or don't find the fertile ground, not forgetting the Nazis. On a massive scale, one has succeeded by and large to have these systems running. So yeah, in our definition, that would be typical transformative social innovation, and depending on how you delineate its the time period and what's in and what's out. The interesting thing with the social economy, but especially the basic income, that is a kind of counter-social innovation, which is being asserted, pointing out the inertia that you have in the welfare system as it has developed, because it's too inert, it's not efficient, there's a lot of bureaucracy, it has some exclusion tendencies, and so forth. And it's not sustainable in the light of further mechanization of labor, and so forth. So that's a bit the background against which then the basic income comes up as another social innovation, but then launched by people who are critical of the earlier social innovation. But in talking about it, I guess it underlines how important it is, what one understands as social innovation. Because this idea that states as social innovators is not so common. There's quite some understandings around which states, what they do, that's not social innovation. It's supposed to be civil society, the citizens, social entrepreneurs.
Going back to the theme of the global brain, we have relatively recently started to work on this paradigm of an offer network, which I see as a kind of a merging and integration of most of these things that are called social innovations, in the sense that it would become a universal platform for people to collaborate in the most synergetic possible way, and not based on money, so it would bypass the whole capitalist economy. The idea that if somebody has something to offer and something that he asks, that the system would try to match all the offers and all the demands so that everybody gets what he needs and gives what he's willing to give. And there would be some kind of reputation mechanism that would make sure that there are no free riders who exploit the system. That means that they ask more than they give. While people who give more than they ask would be kind of rewarded by a growth in reputation, so that they would be motivated to participate in the system. But to implement it, you need quite a complex algorithmic structure, which is what we will now have our workshop on with some people in artificial intelligence. It's not a trivial thing to implement it, but it's a generalization of all these different things like Uber, recycling centers, a website where you advertise things that you are willing to share with your neighbors, Airbnb. All of these things are kind of specific variations of this general theme. So what we are trying to do is make a general paradigm that encompasses all these special cases.
Like these task sharing platforms.
Task sharing platforms, so what we will speak the time, what is it called, the time
banks.
Time banks,
Yeah.
the currency, community currencies. All of these are special cases of that. But my point is that because it's all special cases, because these are all special systems with their own limited community and their own limited rule, it's very inefficient. If all of these things could be submerged into one big system, the way the internet kind of submerged all the other local networks, computer networks that existed before, the whole system would become so much more efficient that lots of things we now seem impossible to do would become possible. If you could share not just a ladder with your neighbors, but your apartment with somebody on the other side of the ocean, and your ladder with your neighbors, and the apples that fell from your tree with your brother, and all of these things would be in one transparent system where the artificial intelligence behind it would make sure that you don't have to remember exactly what to put where and under which rules, and it doesn't cost anything. Then I think that would be kind of the utopian vision of the global brain, if you could get there. Of course, we aren't there yet, but I think that all these examples you give are steps in that direction, and what we are now kind of brainstorming on is, can we design a kind of a generic system that would integrate all these small initiatives?
But there has been quite some interesting stuff happening at the level of the time banks, which is one specific thing, but which has been very much homogenized and normalized by some sort of computer program or computer platform, basically.
Well, I would like to look into those because I know there have been some experiments that worked pretty well. And so what works there may also work for our systems.
The interesting thing there is also because it's exchange, and exchange very much based on trust, which requires communities of a limited size.
Not necessarily if you have reputation, if you have reliable reputation mechanisms.
Yeah, or at least that's how it evolved in the case study, as I know it from my colleague. Indeed, that can be enlarged, that community. In case, Osteron wrote interesting things about that. And I get that seems to be possible, but what I also remember is that at a certain point what they experience that if you keep it, they tend to grow, these groups of people sharing their time through one time bank. They needed mediators, and at a certain point, at a certain size, the mediator couldn't take it anymore. And then for new members, they would need a new mediator in order to be able to start a new circle. Out of that, they started to work on software. I don't know how it works, I only know why they started working on it. And now they have that, and then they think they further developed it into some kind of standardized package. And then now you also have different setups of time banks on different ideological bases or on different principles. So apparently the case study is very interesting to you, I think.
Yes, I should look into that too. Did you make a study on that? Or?
It's a colleague, it's another of our 20 case studies. It's a colleague, English colleague, also did it. Who actually works for time banks also as well. It's not only studying.
Because the software, I know enough about all the kind of softwares that was there from the beginning of the internet until now. The quality of the software is essential. If you get to the level of Google that you can make the really very smart software that anticipates all the wishes, then you can change the world. But there are lots of intermediate levels of software where things become much easier, but still there are lots of hiccups and frictions and things that are not clear, and I suspect they are somewhere in that stage. But if you would take that to the level of the intelligence, let's say, of the Google search engine, then it could become a global brand.
Yeah, I think as Bonno says, that as far as I know the case study, but you should really speak then or to Paul, which is the researcher who did that. I think the ambition there was with the time banks was to sort of mechanize some part of the group formation and not to give this a form of intelligence or something like that. But I have, as you guys don't have a proper idea what the software is supposed to do.
It was mostly a kind of efficiency consideration, as I remember it, that they reached the limits of what could be done, and then from a more political perspective or governance perspective, it's a bit of a intense approach to the matter. Then my question would be, also in such a system, also as you envision it, there's different kinds of sharing, right? There's Uber how it started, and there's Uber how it is now. There's similar sharing schemes, there's time banks, and you have the whole spectrum between informal, trust-based exchange, altruism towards egoism, and everything in between, as underlying principles under these exchanges that you can facilitate through a program. How could you deal with, or how would these normative principles or codes, how can you deal with that? How does that evolve then?
Well, that will be the reputation mechanism, and building a universal reputation mechanism will not be easy, not at all trivial, but there are already local examples where it works pretty well. Then what the reputation mechanism basically should do is estimate how pleased the people who accept your offers are with the offer relative to how much demands you put on the system. if you put more demands than you are offering in return, then your reputation should go down. If you produce more so that people are happy with what you offer than what you demand, then your reputation goes up. So things like Airbnb, I don't know how they work, but they have reputation systems, which I think probably basically just say, I got the apartment, and the apartment was nice and clean, and I liked it, and this guy came to my apartment, and afterwards everything was messy, so he's not a good thing. If lots of people make these estimates, you take an average, you kind of get an idea of like, this guy is to be trusted with my apartment, or this apartment is to be trusted, and you take it into account that maybe you are in urgent need to find an apartment close by, so you're not going to have too many demands, and maybe you will take an apartment that has a reputation of being messy and the water maybe doesn't work and maybe the electricity isn't always on. While in other cases where you have the time and you want really the best one, you will find the one that has the best reputation. So these reputation mechanisms, they are very simple implementation, just the average estimate of the people who have dealt with that person or that thing. But you would probably need some more sophisticated ways if you also want to take into account like externalities.
Yeah, that's what
it's not only the clients that are happy with it, but maybe the neighborhood is not so happy with the side effects. For example, you rent out your apartment or rent out or rent it out to Airbnb, but your neighbors get a lot of noise because of that.
Yeah.
That should also be taken into account.
That would, for me, would be very interesting to consider further. Indeed, how such a global brain and deliberate further development of some of its functionalities, how that could indeed further or maybe speed up the evolution of things like time banks and have them merge or not, because they are very fragmented, yes, but they also work on different normative principles, and that's part of the reasons why they are so fragmented, because it's like churches. They have these slight differences that matter a lot because it's about principles.
Yeah, then the question.
Then
the question is, it would be good to have case studies to see what are these differences and are they really in principle, can they be overcome or can't they be overcome? If they are kind of like, as you say, like religious principles, maybe they will not be overcome by, let's say, rational discussion. But what usually happens in the internet is there are several standards that are competing. Maybe the one is better in some respect, the other is better in the other respect. So there is no real way of merging them. But one of them just becomes bigger than the other one, and then the other one, and the smaller one simply disappears. It's because if one system becomes big enough, everybody wants to join it, and if then the other system has a different node, it just disappears. That's a general dynamic in all complex systems. That's a positive feedback. If something goes faster than the rest, the others in the end disappear. So even if you don't find a nice way of resolving these differences, usually these differences will resolve themselves so that there is a winner takes all, that one of them will come to dominate. And hopefully that's not a commercial player like Facebook, but hopefully that is some kind of a publicly supported protocol like the World Wide Web or like the Internet. The Internet is not a commercial entity. The World Wide Web is not a commercial entity. It's the public. Everybody can contribute to the discussion about what the next step in the protocols of the Internet or the World Wide Web should be. So hopefully this kind of offer network and Skype will evolve in the same way. And then, if that would work, then companies like Uber would go bankrupt because they wouldn't make any money anymore, because the network would provide for free the things that Uber is now paying, is now offering for a fee. Mm-hmm. Which is also what happened in the history of the Internet. Before the Internet, you had commercial providers like CompuServe and America Online that were providing computer networking for a fee, and then the Internet basically made those available for free, so CompuServe disappeared.
But it does pose a little bit the question of how you value the units. You know, what is the how get the different units which are supposed to be get exchanged, or so how
via
they adjust themselves.
via what well, often networks, the idea comes from a colleague of mine, Ben Goetzel, who formulated in terms of conditioned action rules. I'm willing to do this on the condition that I get something else in return. But the something else you get in return, it's not like a Bauler where you need to find one person that needs the thing you are willing to give and that gives you the thing that you need. It's the whole network. So it's spread out over the whole network. So you get something in return from somebody else who has something to do with it. So that is the implicit value. But some people will be altruistic and will just provide things for free. So what Ben did not include in his original vision is that we should also have an element of the gift economy. That means that some people should be putting in offers for free, which I think is it's not at all abnormal. People are giving lots to charity, are doing lots of volunteer efforts, are writing Wikipedia, for example, without being paid for it. So if you take that into account, it can, in principle, both account for commercial transactions and for purely altruistic transactions. But the network itself should find, via its intelligent algorithms, the most efficient way of fulfilling all the demands. And if something is available for free, it will also just you to buy it somewhere where you have to pay for it.
And I would also think, because talking about demands and exchanges, it's in the end the basic, it rests very much in individual demands, right? I would also find it interesting from a social innovation perspective what's such in global brain developments, what that's, how that could empower groups, not so much individuals, because a lot of social innovation is precisely
yes.
about
I mean, I've also
developing
talked about that because in the let's say the mathematical or the computational representation, I'm speaking about agents. An agent can be an individual, but an agent can also be a group or organization. So an agent, let's say me and my friends have some great idea to build a school somewhere in an African village. That's not something that one individual can do, and for that we have a demand of building materials and trucks and some other equipment. And so we propose this project to the offer network, and different people are willing to provide some of these things, and if we gather enough as a group, we can start building the school.
It's a bit like a crowdfunding in nature.
Crowdfunding is another example of it. Crowdfunding is again an example, but you don't necessarily assume that it's funding with money.
Yeah,
It's funding by volunteer efforts,
by
offers in general.
stuff all time.
Stuff. Some stuff which you get for free, some stuff you will get for a condition. Or the condition can, in the traditional case, be that you get money for it. It can be something else. Yeah, it is that in the end, money would no longer be needed to make the whole system function. I'm just writing the paper about it. It will be ready in a week, so if you're interested, I can send it to you.
Yeah.
But it's a very new idea, so we're still fully developing it. That's why we're having a small workshop, so maybe you might also want to participate in that.
You said December.
December 5th.
I think it's
December
4.
4. December 4.
Yeah, just. But what we could also do is,
Well,
what
actually,
we
if you
could
want
do,
to,
we have 20 cases. Just consider. Yeah, we can just give the list, and we can just. The exercise can be done for every 20 of them. How global brain functionalities, current and future. Might affect them. It would be a nice thinking exercise. And you have yeah, we have some empirical knowledge of those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, the time banks is very.
The time bank is
the first
definitely
one that
very
comes to
relevant
mind.
for what we are thinking
But what more do we have? We have, for example, we have participatory budgeting involving citizens in the budgeting of governments that used to be quite corrupt. It started in Brazil, no surprise. And that transparency could be served in global bank rules. Basic income we have, which I could imagine.
Well,
Not that the global brain matters.
yeah, I
so
see the
little.
basic income translated in these offer networks, not so much as the basic amount of money, but as a basic, as a provision of basic necessities for life.
Yeah,
So that
but
you
no
should
one
make
comes
sure that
from
the
access to
network
service.
provides you the opportunity to get some basic things for free. And of course, getting an accommodation for free to the global bank will need some more than just asking people whether they have a house somewhere that they don't need. It will need some more investment. But food, for example, now they have these rules in France that supermarkets can't throw away their food anymore.
Yeah.
What you could do, for example, by this offer network is whatever food is no longer needed because of these things, you put it there, and the network makes sure that people immediately get what they need. And that the network tells you, you need the bed, the shortest place to get the free one is there at that hour.
There's also one case that I know, which Adrian does on seat swapping.
Oh yeah.
Swapping seats, exchanging seats in the UK and I don't know where the others.
No, but the seats of what?
Plats. Great.
In order to democratize the growing and cultivation against monopolizing. For diversity, so it's very socio-technical innovations. Purely social. Can be studied as social innovation. Yeah, that one would be nice.
Yeah, the seats would be a pretty straightforward application.
Yes, yeah. I think it's interesting to do for 20 of them. At least if you have certain sets of global brain applications or developments that you single out, let's say 3 of them or something, to compare against, to consider their implications for those 20 cases. So if you have 3 of them with 60 items in the table to
Well,
consider.
it's kind of one big paradigm is offer network, so it should principally be able to apply to almost anything. Of course, if it's about, for example, participating in budgeting by governments, it's not really an offer and a demand. So it's always the idea that you try to balance or to match offers and demands.
Yeah, well,
What's the demand? In this case, it's the demand for transparency, maybe. Yeah, maybe if you say the demand is for transparent, non-corrupt budgeting, and the offer is for citizens who are willing to check the accounts.
But if it doesn't work, that's valuable as well, because in that way you're finding out about the edges of the transformative potentials of particular global brain functionalities, which is also interesting to find out.
Yeah, the
It's
question
in
is
some
whether
cases it
all
will
these
have a
cases
strong
of social
impact on
innovations could be formulated in this paradigm, because if they could, then you would also have a theoretical framework for social innovation.
Could you explain that again?
If all these cases of social innovation, if they could be reformulated in this theoretical framework of offer networks, that would be handy for you, because then you would have a theoretical framework to define social innovation more precisely.
Yeah.
But not all of them function over a platform of exchange. I mean, almost all function over some sort of network. either people or
Well,
items
the
or whatever.
technological platform, that's what makes it more efficient, but that's not essential. In theory, you could have all these things just by people talking to each other.
Well, you could, of course, therefore it makes sense to diversify, to select, let's say, 3 specific global brain functionalities, not the thing as a whole. Like the platform, maybe, and another would be, I don't know, communication, sharing ideas. Well, there's something to think through, which particular global brain functionalities would be worthwhile distinguishing, and then you can move further. And then indeed some of our cases are more platform-like, and others are of another kind.
Well, I think if you speak about social innovation, somewhere you're always speaking about some mechanism of coordination between people, so that together they can do things better than they do them individually. It's kind of the definition of what's social. In coordination, you need some kind of a mechanism, if not purely communication. It can be algorithmic, it can be via rules, it can be via laws, it can be via platform. In the essence, it's always coordination.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have come to in my theory of the global brain is that the essence is coordination. The better your coordination, the smarter your system, the more efficient, the more sustainable, the more global brain-like it is. And that coordination should not be viewed as in the old view as something that's top-down, imposed, that there is some kind of hierarchy that says that person should do that thing and then that person should do that thing. No, typically the coordination is bottom-up. That person does that thing and then the other person sees what he has done and reacts in this way, and like that they get coordinated.
Yeah, that coordination that could help us to clarify. To us, it's now social innovation is about new organizing, new doing, new framing, new knowing. Okay, it's not absolute those 4, but it's also not by accident that we hit upon those 4 precisely. But we could rethink them in terms of coordination. And again, do the exercise for 20 cases. There's others to consider, but 20 is that much of different empirical stories that it covers quite a lot. Yeah, and in the end, we find the definition, and then there's other things falling inside and out of it. Of what is social innovation. Like also the global brain, I would say, it's innovation in communication. Right?
Well,
can be social,
let's
technical.
say that the big step we have made recently is that we have extended from innovation in communication to innovation in exchange, where exchange can be exchange of information, but also exchange of goods and services. So the global brain coordinates exchanges in the broad sense. And the more intelligent it is, the better the coordination, that means the less waste, the more efficiency, the more people will get what they need.
The answer to what kind of an innovation global brain is very interesting to answer. Try to articulate precisely. A bit in the lights of this whole exercise that we're doing here, like socio-technical innovation, social innovation, technical innovation, to the extent that you see the point in going into these definitions in the first place, of course. But at least to me, it would be interesting to try to specify what it is precisely innovating. I have asked a similar question about the self-driving car.
The pity that one of our members, Mixel Keegan, isn't here because he made a PhD on innovation, not so much social innovation, but innovation in a very broad sense, in the sense of cognitive discovery, economic innovation, technological innovation.
And what was his name again?
Mixel Keegan. But he made his PhD, but now he's looking for a job, that's why we don't see much of him. It's not easy to find a job with his background. He's a computer scientist actually, but he has been working on these kind of social aspects.
Yeah.
But he's also working with case studies, so he's looking at cases of social innovation in Belgium now at the moment.
Yeah, that's also. Contact him, just like you, because I think there's more generally there's an enormous activity of empirical research after social innovation going on by different kind of researchers.
Well,
often don't know
his interest and experience was most with the open source movement. Do you know the Drupal community?
Yeah.
Drupal, it's quite a big web system for creating your own website. It was originally started by a guy here in Belgium who made it open source 10 years ago, and now they have very big conferences with thousands of people each year to develop the whole software system further.
Really?
And so there they have all kind of innovations on how to get people together and to let them collaborate on the software.
Yeah, here and there we have also some of open source inspired cases, the hackerspaces, Fab Labs.
No, FabLabs is another
Daisies.
thing.
I just don't know that much about it. But it's that's also a particular group that is quite interesting to consider through the global ranges, so to say.
There was a guy that gave a seminar here that was afterwards in the PhD community of Mixel, who was also doing kind of experimenting with hypothesis. Working at the University of Edinburgh, but actually residing in Italy. What was his name?
Another guy.
Yeah, another guy. Yeah. Alfonso Molina, that's it. Alfonso Molina.
That's a business guy. Also, yeah, I'll write it down.
Yeah, you will find him.
Yeah, maybe. We have somebody in the text. The design, the new design people. To design a new societal meaning.
I think he was working on, was it not with educational experiments of having people working for drugs or something? He gave a seminar here a couple of years ago.
Yeah, another a bit of a different question is like, okay, we have this idea that what we hitting upon through what we do, we just do what we do, don't demonstrate it, global brain researchers. But I think we hit upon on the politics of the global brain, as I call it. Is there particular work you can recommend on that
I
topic?
think there is work on the topic yet. We are debating it, but it's not an obvious thing. It's not what the politics of the global brain. Cabral has some ideas of how the politics should be, but it doesn't mean that that's how it will be.
Well, I just think that what we've come to think of as representative democracy within the structure of nation states itself has to be overcome, and I don't think the solution is a global democracy in the sense that we would think of global representatives. What I'm saying, you can't just move the state to the global level in the same structure, that it needs to be what I think is I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but global common sense in some sense. You know, like you don't.
Easily said.
Let me before you start responding. My point is that, do we need a global democracy to, for example, tackle global warming? Do we need to have a democracy about that? I don't think so. I don't think you have a democracy over whether you solve global warming. We have to coordinate to solve global warming. It's a matter of common sense. So so nation states spend trillions of dollars every year on military. To me, it's common sense that you transition those funds through international coordination towards solving the energy crisis.
It's just the fact that common sense does not just apply all the forces of competition.
My position is very straightforward and easy to understand. You have to have something like a repurposed United Nations that is able to reduce the power and autonomy of nation states in regards to global commons issues. If we're thinking about the global brain, we're thinking about a world where you go beyond states and markets towards a networked commons. So you have to have some sort of guided self-organization process to get there. I think a repurposed United Nations is how you do it. And common human earth value systems need to be embraced. There needs to be some sort of international entity that facilitates a guided self-organization towards a human planetary symbiosis of some kind. And right now, you see a United Nations that can't do anything, that has no functional power or abilities almost at all. So, to me, it comes, back to your idea of what your entity is about transit, which is about challenging dominant institutions and structures. I think that's what we need more than anything. But that has to involve really challenging our imaginations in terms of what we think of as, again, to me, the nexus of representative democracy and capitalism. If we can't break out of representative democracy and capitalism and try and form some sort of, again, international union with human and earth values at its core, then we're just leaving it up to self-organization and faith. So that to me is, I think that's pretty. I'm being as clear as I can be in articulating them.
Well, that's what I find interesting. For example, what kind of ideas have been formulated about how this further evolution of the global brain, which evolves out of the interaction and the selection of different kinds of logics, not only state, not only civil society, not only markets, but through the interactions of those. Are there some theories being formulated about how these different codes or logics might balance each other over time? What the eventual tendencies would be, whether it tends towards a market logic or whether it tends towards a networked commons, as you said it, or whether it tends to a radical open democracy, rather than the question that where it should go, because that is not how I study politics. That's also important, but that's to me, that's not
Well, I think we all were quite
question
inspired
to
by
answer.
the vision of Jeremy Rifkin, the eclipse of capitalism, the zero marginal cost society, where he shows that with the logic of technology becoming more and more efficient, you get more and more of what he calls the collaborative commons, which means that capitalism will become a niche, the market will become a niche. Now it's dominant and the commons is small. In this view, the commons will go and the market-based transactions will become small. And that's also the idea underlying this offer network, that if you make the offer network in such a way that you don't need to go via money, more and more things will just take place like that without the market exchanges. And I think Rifkin has some good arguments for why capitalism in the end is kind of self-contradictory, because it kind of eliminates itself by making things always cheaper, so cheap until you can't make any benefits on that anymore. And that kind of capitalism is finished, because if you can't make money anymore because things have become too cheap, then they become like free, they become common. But he doesn't describe very well what the intermediate stages will be. So he gives examples of existing commons, social innovations like you are, and then he extrapolates that to a world where practically everything will be in the commons. But of course, we know that in between there will be quite some tensions, and that's a difficult question. What will be in between?
Or maybe some work on what you also indicated, that at some point you have the reputation systems who provide for some kind of stabilizing feedbacks, if you can put it like that. Some theorization of the social political feedbacks that might be driving the evolution of such a system.
I'm actually thinking in terms of these reputation systems in the sense that you have some kind of a bootstrapping. Who is considered an authority? Let's take the example of science. Who is considered to be an authority in the scientific domain? The one who is recognized by his peers as such. But who are his peers? The ones that are recognized as authorities. So there is a kind of a bootstrapping mechanism that people are recognized more or less as authorities depending on how many people recognize them that are themselves authorities. And there is a very nice mathematical representation of that. That's the PageRank algorithm that Google uses. What are the most important websites? Those that most other websites link to, but also those that are linked to by those websites that are themselves the most important. So PageRank, you can have a high PageRank if lots of unimportant websites link to you, or if one very important website links to you. So that makes the whole system much more intelligent than just a popularity contest. If it would be just a popularity contest, then if you would let people vote who is the biggest physicist in the world, well, they might know Stephen Hawking, and that would be about it. If you would let physicists vote about who is the biggest physicist, you would get a much more precise answer. But you can do that recursively via the PageRank algorithm, like people say who they trust as scientists, they themselves say who they trust as scientists, those themselves say who they trust as scientists, and like that you let just accumulate, and you see which people are indirectly trusted. And one of my former students, Marco Rodriguez, proposed a very nice, what he calls a collective decision-making engine, something to replace representative democracy. That is that whenever you need to vote about an issue, everybody can vote, but most people will not want to vote because they don't know anything about the issue. But those people who do vote get a number of votes multiplied by their trust, by their recursive trust. So, if I don't vote, my vote goes to the people I have said I trust. If those don't vote, that vote propagates further to the people they vote. If those don't vote, it still propagates, and in the end, those who do vote will have the propagated votes indirectly of all the ones that indirectly trusted them. So that means that maybe only 10 people need to take a vote. But some of these people will represent, let's say, the Greens, some of these will represent the workers, some of those will represent the factory owners, and they will have accumulated trust like that. And like that, you can, in principle, make a democratic decision without having to ask everybody to vote on everything. And without having the representative democracy, where it's always the same people having to vote about everything, and then it's easy to corrupt. In this case, the people who vote are the ones who are most involved and who typically know most, but they carry the vote of all the others. And that kind of mechanism kind of already plays indirectly in the world, it certainly plays in the world of science, and via a smart reputation mechanism, like in the offer network, it could be used to determine the relative importance of different groups, people, organizations, what's their weight in making decisions, how, if they make a demand on the system, how serious do you take that demand?
So that is one of the possible political evolutionary courses that it might take,
Yes.
amongst others, well, depending on the kind of feedbacks.
Yeah, and to me it's a scenario that is both very positive, or at least it looks more positive than what exists now. You would have to study it in practice to see whether there are any corruptions of the system. That looks very positive, and that is doable in the sense that there is already some dynamics in that style. There is already a dynamic that, if you want to know, let's say, who is the best physicist and you're not at all a scientist, you will ask your friend who may be a geographer, but your friend knows a little bit about physics and tells you, well, that guy is a physicist, ask him, who will then tell you, and like that you get an idea. So it's not unrealistic that it will happen like that, and it looks like a smarter system than what we have now. And these kind of reputation mechanisms that we envisage for the global brain should harness that, should make that doable, that you have really this propagation of trust.
Yeah, and there's people out there in the world building these kind of systems.
Systems are being built.
I know very little about this because I'm quite stupid with computers, but I know there's social innovation, and I know within social innovation there is all kinds of computer experts, hackers, working on these kind of systems, I know. And then it's interesting to figure out a little bit more and have it a bit more clear on the table what are precisely the feedbacks that they try to create and what are their ideas about what it will achieve. Like what was it again? Not a global brain. The Internet of Things, for example, is also to me quite similar in the sense that it is partly a technical or socio-technical reality, and at the same time also being elevated to an ideal on some points. And also in that direction, I can imagine that you can find, I asked the question that I can find some more theorization of the politics of the global brain.
You should read the book of Rifkin, The Zero Marginal Cost Society.
Yeah.
It's a very good